Soundstripe.
Welcome to South End Supporters of St. Louis City SC podcast, powered by Ready to Live Wellness, and coming at you from the Warrior Logo Square studio. Eric Cole alongside the Monday morning center back Dave Wyckoff, as our buddy DH is out tonight. But wow, what a wild 48 hours it has been, not only just with the whole everything going on within the game that City happened on Saturday night, but then come to get an alert that I don't really think a lot of us were expecting this morning, that City has parted ways with sporting director Lutz Steel. Whole lot to cover. Before we get into all that, Dave, how are we doing this evening?
It's complete batshittery over the last 3 days. Like, what in the world is going on? Like, the season's supposed to be, like, winding down, and we're supposed to be transitioning into, like, American football and, like, following our English teams and getting into the European game and Champions League and transitioning into, like, one show a week and more kolache chalk, and then just the floodgates of batshittery just opened. Like, somebody just, like, daddy's home, kicked the door open, broke the lamp, knocking furniture all over the place. Like, good God, man. But, hey, exciting. So, yeah.
Ate our snacks and then left. It's almost like City was paying attention and, like, you know, they're talking a little bit too much about kolaches. We got to reel them back into soccer somehow. What can we do? Like, we got to make some moves, guys. So, yeah.
Well, we will get our kolache talk in, though. Yeah. Let's be very clear. We will not have our kolache talk curtailed by inconsequential soccer talk.
Yeah, it's
like,
going to take a lot more.
This is a kolache podcast.
Yeah. Don't you get it straight. It's almost a shame that we branded this sort of podcast prior to kolache coming on, because who knows what it would have went.
If we had known about kolaches before soccer, this would be an STL kolache podcast featuring some soccer talk. Yeah. I did really enjoy going back through the South End submission the people sewed last week. At the beginning, when Jay Clem got my internet, he got your internet the first sewed, got my internet the second sewed, but I did enjoy you guys and your kolache talk until I was able to jump back on. Yeah. And did you happen to see that there has been an olive branch offered out to us from Top Corner Talk, a la Jay Clem, to do a collaborative live show, I think, to hash out all our differences.
No, I have not seen that. That's interesting. I almost feel like
that was the peace offering, I think, was a collaboration. So I don't know, man. We'll have to see, because I know we're sitting at like 65% right now. So I think he's messing with us again. You really find out who your friends are when you're in the podcast world.
Here's my hope, is that he didn't get the memo that DH was out tonight, and he went to his house thinking that
he went to his house. Yeah,
he hasn't gotten him yet. So that's my hope, is that he was there that night. But yeah, the peace offering, we'll see. You know, I almost feel like it could be a Trojan horse situation where he's like, oh, look at this nice, gift offering that we're getting here, and then we fall for it.
Meanwhile, he shows up to our house and ransacks our home studios.
Meanwhile, we're sitting in the waiting room for whatever Zoom operations that he's got going. I hope they'll be here soon. Logging in now, guys.
He butchers a stuffed giraffe in effigy as a warning to us.
Yeah. He cuts the head off a stuffed giraffe and, like, leaves it in our mailbox. Yeah.
You just found, like, just kolaches just smashed all over the place, uneaten but smashed. Oh, man. Those are some heavy-handed tactics from those guys at Top Corner Talk.
I know. We don't get our eggs or our house egged. We get it kolachied, just like.
We get it kolachied. Man, this hashtag podcast wars is a serious business, man. I'm telling you.
The real problem is, if there really truly is a podcast war, there's not. We love you guys. But if there was, we just gave them a whole plethora of things.
We did. We'll cut that out. We'll edit that out, I'm sure.
If I go to bring the trash cans in tomorrow and I see stuffing all around the house, I'm going to that's when the concern will start to get in. But, well, I guess we'll try and
there's no transition. Just move past it.
Soccer talk from there, I guess we could say. But yeah, I think this was a It was an interesting one just because of, I guess, the timing for everything for me. It was just I can't see where. I know the window was ending, and I'm curious to see. Do you think that was kind of the final deciding factor? Do you think City put out a little bit, more? They wanted more coming in this transition window to try and, But at the same time, what are you going to really do to truly turn a season around with bringing in new people from here as well, like big signings? I know, and we had Follow Fall come in. He made a big impact. He started, having to deal with a little bit of, I think you said, visa issues, which is why he was out for Vancouver. But I don't know. What's your take on the whole Lutz situation right now?
So I wasn't surprised by it, honestly. You can only fire so many coaches before the responsibility has to fall on somebody else. So it wasn't a total surprise. Timing-wise, I think it makes sense because ideally, you want to start the look for a sporting director first, and then they can help they can assist and they can have control of looking for a head coach. So I think those are the things that have to be done first, and then you set up the future of your organization, who's going to call the shots from a personnel perspective, from a tactics perspective. Then you could start thinking about off-season transfer window. So timing and everything, it makes sense. I want to say before we dive into sort of the criticisms that we could have or why we think that he ultimately lost his job, that regardless of what you think about the end product, I would like people to remember that the passion that Lutz brought as the initial sporting director was such an exciting thing for us. And it didn't end how anybody wanted it to end. I mean, nobody gets into the business of sports to not win. He didn't get into being a sporting director because he wanted to just, make money and, just be visible and stuff like that. Like, the guy was a player at a high level. He was a sporting director at a high level. He was there trying to build something from the ground up. And it has to be one of the hardest things in sports to build something from the ground up. And regardless of how it ended, Lutz will always be part of the fabric and the foundation of City. Now, however long it takes before they get back to competitive relevance, that's a different story. We can talk about that all day. But I think it's important to remember that all the exciting moments that we've had over these first 2 3/4 seasons, he was a big part of all of that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think we owe him, respect and, gratitude. Obviously we wanted more. Obviously he wanted more, but, I don't think that anyone should leave his tenure thinking that he wasn't trying to put the best product on the field. That's my opinion. I know that the socials are a little different and people think he didn't do enough, in the different windows and just had different markets. Your hindsight is always 20/20, but I think, Lutz did about as well as could have been expected for a ground up project.
Yeah, this is just me speaking on myself, but I'm going to look back at the Lutz tenure as a fond memory. I think he should always be held as a positive when you look back on times of people that have been in and out of this organization. I look at it as a positive. I think you're exactly right. It's such a tough thing to try and build something from the ground up and be successful. And again, we've said this quite a few times on the show. We don't know what all Lutz did try that just didn't work out. We don't know what players he approached that he wasn't maybe able to meet the financial demands of that player. We don't know what all happened behind the scenes as far as what he was going for. I think maybe one of our little criticisms, and we brought this up a couple weeks ago, was maybe he just tried to get a little too cute with some of the transfers that he did bring in. But this is I feel like one of those leagues where you just never know. Something like that could end up working out, and if it would have worked out, you'd have looked at him as a genius. And unfortunately, a lot of times it just didn't work out. But you're exactly right. He never had any sort of intention of not wanting to win. There were many games where he was the one who seemed to be celebrating the most on the field with the team with big wins, and there were many games where he was the one in the ref's face demanding why certain calls weren't after a loss. So I always thought that passion from Lutz was definitely there. Another thing that, kind of goes unnoticed, but, people definitely brought up a lot of times on the socials as well, was just the attention that he brought to St. Louis City. He was a big broadcaster for ESPN when it came to the German leagues, and every time you saw him, he had that St. Louis City little pin on his jacket or his shirt or whatever it was. Like, he did his best to still constantly bring that attention to, the city. Now, I know a lot of people now are going to look at it, and they've been saying it, he's not focused enough. He's too dedicated, doing the other things with broadcasting. I don't buy any of that because it worked that first year. It's just one of those tough situations. Another thing I want people to remember was, I believe it was a year ago or 2 years ago, remember he was linked to be one of the Saudi Pro League's sporting director, and people were on the socials begging Lutz not to go. So I think a lot of this is just, what's the saying? Like, in the moment, people are definitely feeling
prisoner of the moment.
Prisoner of the moment. Thank you. Yeah, I think and it is tough when you're seeing what has happened kind of over the past 2 years. You would say, just as far as like, and it's always going to be that way. And I do like that out of a fan base, to be passionate and demanding of your organization to go help strengthen and turn your team around when things are struggling. So I do appreciate that, but I do truly feel like at the end of the day, people will look back on Lutz's tenure here, and they should hopefully think of it as a positive, more so than outweighing the negatives, because really he is the one, we look at the past 2 years, but he's had, almost 3 years put into this as far as just development and all that type of stuff goes. So it's just a tough situation. So now they transition to not only having to figure out a new sporting director position, but as well as the head coaching position, because, Critch's future is still up in the air as that goes. As far as a sporting director, goes, would you be more hoping they go to find somebody that has experience within the MLS and they know kind of more of the league? Or are you hoping they go get somebody to where maybe they have a little bit more prestige to them? Because it kind of seems like the MLS is transitioning into a way of they are bringing over a little bit more European talent a little earlier, and, somebody that maybe has a little bit more connection overseas that would help bringing in these players, kind of like Lutz had somewhat with the German connection. Which way would you like to see City kind of take that approach as far as the sporting director role?
I think it starts at home, honestly. I think you have to find somebody that, sporting director-wise, I think we've said this before, but this team is not ever going to be a major market spender. So I think that your sporting director's main focus, your first focus of your sporting director should be building your academy and strengthening your academy, because this team's going to have to support itself through homegrowns and the sale of homegrowns and the development, the transfers of prospects elsewhere, more or less a Brighton model, a Brentford model, something like that, but in the MLS sense, right? I think that is your sporting director for STL City SC is going to have to be somebody that does that better than anybody. Now, the choice of a head coach is going to have to be between your sporting director and Diego Gigliani, who so far has not shown the ability to identify poor coaching choices. I think that Lutz, in terms of negativity, Lutz will be forever linked with the Mellberg hiring, and that Mellberg hiring and subsequent firing is what will really sully the entire reputation. Like, you can say what you want about signings, but I feel like signings are so fickle. Signings signings are a flip of a coin, basically, right? Sometimes you get Marcel Hartle, sometimes you get Zonde Silva. That's in my mind. So, but I think you can't miss with a head coach, and you definitely cannot miss with two head coaches, and you definitely can't end up with three different head coaches, and the one that seemingly had the most momentum doesn't end up with the job for whatever reason. Now, he may have chosen not to get that job. We've never been privy to that, but academy. I mean, a strong academy program. I mean, without revealing, people who we've talked to about issues within the club, I think it's safe to say that the entire academy project so far has kind of been underwhelming. Now, you've got some really good players that have come out, and like Mackay, and you've got Lorenzo Cornelius, who everybody seems to think is going to be a stud. at some point. But overall, you're not seeing a ton of our academy players end up in the MLS, not even with City so far. Now, I realize it's only been in existence for a couple of years, but, they're not ending up, and this is all this is all back channel for us, right? This is what we're being told that other people are being told, that our academy players aren't ending up at these top D1 programs like some of these other academy players are. So that's kind of an issue. That kind of speaks to, okay, if you don't have kids going to the best college, if you don't have kids flying through your program, then what are you doing? And what needs to change to make you like a top 5, like developmental academy? So those are my thoughts. Academy first, build the strength from within, hire, I think a coach with a reputation of being competitive in the MLS. I think that's what I hate to say it, somebody like a Vermees, would make sense.
I've seen
just
that name
because he knows
a little bit.
He knows how to win. He knows how to compete in the MLS. He knows what it takes. He knows what a competitive team looks like. Now, it obviously ran its course in Kansas City, but that would be really interesting too. That'd be great for the rivalry. So those are my thoughts. How about you?
Be like Quinville going to Chicago, like right after leaving the Blues, kind of that type of deal.
I hope it works out like that. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. It seems to me with the timing, it seems to be maybe centered around the transfer market. I'm really curious to see, because it was always kind of like Lutz model, Lutz style play, Lutz of this, like whoever they do bring in, do we then shift to a different play style? Do we then shift? I know it's ultimately going to be up to the manager, but who you hire on as a manager, maybe, we saw how it could work if you bring in somebody that plays a completely different style, like a Melberg. I don't know. I know they kept trying to say that he was going to continue on the same style. It was pretty glaring that he didn't. I think this news just made this offseason that much more interesting as well, because there's been a lot of talk of, a lot of contracts, options, and all that type of stuff being up at the end of this year. Lutz, what was it, a month back, put out that presser saying, a lot of guys better be, playing for the rest of this year because they got a lot on the line. And now all of a sudden Lutz is out. So it's really wild as far as just to see where they do decide to go from here. I know they said like Diego Gigliani and then Hackworth are going to kind of take over Lutz's duties throughout the main time, with the transfer window kind of ending, I believe at the end of this month. That just basically leaves like them in charge of, I guess, mainly finding the new coaching role as far as that goes. And then maybe getting together and deciding on some off-season stuff, because I think coaching role has to be one of the few things or first things that because you don't know where, maybe not necessarily hiring for the rest of the season, but as far as is this coach, this new manager that you bring in, going to want any of these players? Does he see how he could maybe get the best out of some of these players? Does he feel like they're being misused in certain situations? And he's, somebody that's watching this game thinking like, you give me these, 6 people and then add in a few things that I would like to have, and then I can really do something with this team. I think it does seem to be like the model would maybe work out best with being a former MLS team, at least just for even if you're looking at a short period of time, just to get us back into the MLS model, I guess you could say, because it does seem like a lot of times when you see these bigger name coaches or something come over, it's kind of a flip of a coin, just like with the transfer window, a player coming in, on whether that can work. Is that outside model or that outside way of thinking as far as the MLS league compared to, European league. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, or really leading up to this offseason. I guess, and you said earlier, it wasn't necessarily a surprise. I guess to me, it wasn't necessarily a surprise, and I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. It wasn't necessarily a surprise in the fact that it happened. I guess I was more anticipating this sort of news to happen towards the end of the season, but you bring up a good point. You want to try and get somebody in to kind of, get the process rolling as far as, manager and everything going forward. What does surprise me a little bit, and I don't even know if they look into this, maybe I'm overreading it or whatever, is after the game on Saturday, it seemed like the fan base was really directing their frustrations and attentions away from the club, mainly towards the referees and stuff like that. I felt like that could have almost bought you a week of just like, hey, they're not focused on us right now. Let's, drag the attention away. then we don't have, Lutz out talk for another week or people flipping out over that. That's where I almost thought like they would have maybe gave him another week or, a little bit more towards the end of the season as far as the actual announcement and everything goes. But to me, is it just they wanted more out of the transfer market and didn't get it, and they kind of put the blame on Lutz for that? Am I way off market on that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it just seemed like the attention was away from the club as far as like, players, Lutz, all that, and it was directed towards the referees after that game. I felt like maybe that could have bought City a week of like still trying to like, hey, let's ride this wave for a little bit.
Yeah. Shout out! First of all, shout out to all the people who cover the team, the beat reporters. We talk about Baker and Manuel Veth and Will Bratton and Jeremy Clemens. Like they were all over social media for other reasons, not speculating on Lutz being fired. But since then have done some really excellent reporting. And I see some consistent speculation that the lack of activity in the transfer window may have been the last straw for ownership. And if you're going to make a move anyway, why not just go ahead and do it? That's my thought on it. And I also saw some fan speculation, and we can get more into this later because obviously we're going to talk about the game and the call. But there was some vitriol from the fans that Lutz was on the field shaking hands with Thomas Muller after the game.
Yeah, I saw like reports of that. I didn't see it personally.
That obviously didn't sit. That didn't sit well. That didn't sit well with some people. But that obviously wasn't the reason that he was shit canned. But
yeah, right.
Anyway, no, I think I kind of agree with that overarching speculation that it was like, this has been such a dumpster fire of just a season, and the transfers have just been the icing on the cake. So let's go ahead and part ways and start looking now as opposed to waiting till the end of the season, which I commend them for. It's the sunken cost fallacy is real. So I commend them for recognizing when you need to recognize mistakes and go ahead and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not planning on moving forward with him, which it seemed like had been the writing on the wall kind of coming the past couple weeks, and you're looking to get a coach in, you have to have a sporting director working with everybody as far as making that decision. And the sooner you get that done, the sooner you can kind of get that ball rolling. What do you think it is when it comes to like a sporting director being left? Do you think it's a lot of like more so, let's just say it was for the transfer market, him bringing forth names and them just being like, what are we talking about? You want this guy? Like, why not? Like maybe they're suggesting players and Lutz is like, you don't want that. And then that player, ends up, what do you think or do you think it's Lutz demanding more from the club and the club being like, we can't facilitate that right now? Like, and then there's just an impasse of like the two heads meeting. Like, do you think it's more, it's just unfortunate his head roll when maybe it's still a little bit higher up? What are you, is there any reporting on that? I'm sure probably not, but like, what would you think it would be more? So it's just him bringing names and they're like, hey, these haven't worked. Why are we still going this route?
The soccer world is so big that it's just kind of meaningless to like speculate on our part until something is reported as almost done. I don't know what their scouting department does or how it functions, as opposed to like an American sport that, all free agency is a very limited market per sport. And I don't want to say that it's easy to identify targets, but it's certainly much easier to identify targets when you're the only league in town. But
yeah, right.
It's kind of a comment on the systemic shortcomings that they weren't able to find players that were within whatever perceived budget you have. I mean, think about how much they signed Fall for, $4 million. And that was like the club record transfer fee. Now, granted, the club hasn't been in existence for only a short time, but that should kind of give you an idea of the level of player that you're looking for. Now, he's different because he's an under 22, and they're going to cost more because they're expected to have future value. Like, you can go to like transfer market and stuff like that, although I think that is kind of bullshit speculation for the most part too. That's all based on historical signings and not so much real world value. So I think it's just tough to speculate, and you just have to hope that and have a strong trust that they understand what their market is and that they're not wasting time scouting or going after players that aren't realistic. I don't think that's the case. I think he's probably been around the game too long. Now, too committed to certain pipelines that he already had through his career? Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think living and dying with the Eastern European pipeline was kind of a mistake to not be more involved in, Central America, South America. And listen, just because we didn't hear about any signings or anybody really being approached doesn't mean they tried. It just doesn't mean that they found any success. But that kind of speaks to itself, to the abilities that you never went. You signed, one, I guess you signed, two high profile African players in the whole time that you were here in Blom and Fallout Fall, but almost no high profile South American players or, Liga MX players. It was all, second division Germany or Norwegian Premier or, just leagues that you're just, there's not enough visual evidence to get excited about to me. So if there was a failing, that's where, or any shortcomings in player procurement, it probably started with the limited pipelines or perceived limited pipelines.
Yeah, and especially, I guess you brought up a good point. I feel like maybe more South American players would be more open a little bit to the idea of playing in MLS, whereas, the European model, they're like thinking like, well, I've got, our second division is technically a little bit, I've got a bigger chance over here.
Right.
I'm not going to, and then you brought it up earlier, which is always going to be a great point. It's always just going to be such a tough market to sell St. Louis. And we have to also, as fans, just come to that realization. It's when you got the LAs and the New Yorks, in these bigger cities that are just a little bit more marketable, it's going to be always a tough sell. I think the biggest thing that city's really going to have to ride on is the fan base and what it can, be like, the stadium and all that type of stuff. And so it's going to be, like I said, very interesting to see what direction they go. And, I would love to be almost a fly on the wall of what those interview processes are like and what a sporting director brings to the table and what their vision for a club is, and especially the club right now. Is it a completely different direction? Is it they see something that could work with what is had? So it'll be interesting to kind of keep up on that. So anything else you want to say on the whole Lutz side of things before we
No, I do think that it's important to note, and you kind of reminded me of it right there, that part of the expectation that any sporting director is going to have is not only to field a competitive team, but there's going to be expectation to field a competitive team that plays now a perceived St. Louis style. And I think that's kind of what you were getting to. And I think that's going to be a challenge. I don't like the idea that part of the fan base or ownership or whoever thinks that you have to play this certain aggressive, high-pressing way to be a consistent winner for a St. Louis team. I think it's really a mistake to limit yourself to that one approach. It's exciting. It certainly is, but we've seen the upside of it and we've seen the downside of it. So I'm very open to giving someone else the idea to come in and work a new system that's more possession-based. But I think that's who they're going to look for, is somebody that brings that high energy game. So we'll see. It's going to be a challenge.
I'm with you. I think we got to get away from that the system, and I think everybody's attached to it because of the first year, and they saw what it can do when it does work. But the problem for me with the system is when it doesn't work, then you're kind of like, well, what now? Kind of mindset. Our players are dead tired from sprinting at people and we still got a good 45 still to play. And I feel like that's where it's tougher to shift away from that than to shift into that. And, we kind of saw a little example of that. You and I were watching the Liverpool-Newcastle game today, and you said, Newcastle's all over them. And the first response was, I don't think they can keep up this sort of pressure for that long. And it's similar to a lot of times when we see it working with City. It's kind of like, man, this is working right now. I just don't think we can keep up with this for that long. And I'd rather, to your point, develop a little bit more of a possession style. And then also for the reason being is that it's a lot harder to scout a team like that. We've said this many times on the show, we feel like we're kind of easy to scout our team. Hey, they're going to come and press you for the first 15 minutes. Let's just wither out the storm. They fall off at about this mark, and then they leave themselves exposed at this mark. And we haven't really had a response for that because we're still stuck to this style. So, yeah, I'm with you on that as far as, maybe getting out of that style. But, yeah, again, Lutz Van Steel is out as sporting director, so City will look to replace them. Diego Gigliani and John Hackworth are going to take over his duties until a new sporting director is found. But what we thought was going to be kind of the lead prior to that news coming in was just the absolute – I don't even know. You came up with it. The villainous VAR it's just crazy. I'm rewatching back today, really both PKs to me. I don't get it. And it's such a shame because I do feel like City scored some really well-taken goals. I thought the first goal, especially the wherewithal from Sangbin to leave it, knowing he's offsides, beautiful ball in from Vollum, great header from an on-running Leuven. I mean, you watch a goal like that and you're like, hey, that was great, like in open play and all that type of stuff. And then they have the first one was just so confusing. Their second goal, we should have maybe marked a little bit better at that near post, but you take it as they just scored a good goal on that one. City bounced back. We really get to see the true, reason they sought after Sangbin with that counterattacking speed that can just open you out on the wings. Great second goal. Klaus, I almost thought he messed it up with the touch, turns it around, fantastic finish. You're feeling great. Like I said, they take that one, and then out of nowhere, first off, we'll get into what do you want to start with? The VAR? Do you want to start with the 10 minutes of ridiculousness? Why the hell was that added on? There's so many points in this game where it's just like I said, it was almost a frustrating thing to think, I don't think, City played fantastic by any means. I thought Vancouver was still maybe the better team on the night. I don't think, I saw a couple jabronis from, the MLS or outside leagues being Vancouver got what they deserved. They were, dominating City all night. I don't know where you saw domination from. I thought they maybe had the advantage in the game, but nowhere did I feel geez, we're surviving at this moment. It was so, where do you want to go? Where do you want to start on this one?
So let's start there because that's going to be the shortest discussion, and then we can get into the extracurriculars. So agreed that City was not the better team on the night, but I thought played a very smart, a very well-drilled game for the most part. I thought they really took it to Vancouver early on, sustained that, got the goal, then had the normal, first five, next five, last five letdown, gave up a goal. Fine, okay, it's a battle. It's a 90-minute match. Sat in and absorbed more pressure in the second half. You knew Vancouver is the more skilled team. They're the better possession team. Although City in the first half, at one point, were dominating possession. I think it was 60-40, 65-35 at one point, 25, 30 minutes in the first half. I'd have to look back at that. But either way, second half, Vancouver came out, took more possession to him. City sat deeper, which we don't like to see them sit deep. It just is what it is. At some point you do. But sitting deep with the idea that they can counter, and they did, and that counter was deadly with Sangbin. That was an outstanding counterattack off of, we'll talk about it, the refereeing in a minute, a horrendous call that goes unnoticed because it was inconsequential in the play, almost wasn't inconsequential, but score, go up, give that goal up again, right? Give the lead up again, and then now we can flow into what we're talking about with all the nonsense. I still don't know where 10 minutes of extra time comes from. I guess you could go back and you could probably find 10 minutes. Let's just wrap that up, that extra 10 minutes, with all the strange things that happened throughout the game that just kind of made you scratch your head. I want to say, for both penalties and then the end of the game before, and I don't think we want to belabor was it a foul, was it not a foul? Because obviously we're on the same page. We don't think it was a foul. We don't think there was no clear evidence, but that's kind of beside the point. it's easy to sit there and cry conspiracy. It's easy to sit there and cry bullying of small clubs and kick and scream, Rumpelstiltskin style and stamp your feet and say, this is because we're a small club and this is because the MLS wants to push the Mueller game winner narrative and the whole world is against us. That's too easy and that's too convenient, right? Like, not everything has to be a major conspiracy. I think that there can be bias against smaller clubs, implicit bias, without there being massive conspiracy. What I think actually happened, and I think this happens a lot more often than not, is it was a combination of home team momentum and a referee who was already a bad referee in the first place getting caught up in a moment. But more importantly than that, I truly believe that what you saw on Saturday night was an institutional failure in the MLS's methods of applying VAR to calls. Because to not have the potential penalty on Klaus be reviewed because it was called not a foul on the field, and then to have this one initiated by replay when it was not a foul on the field, when there was not a foul called on the field, couple that with the PK on Padelford, that there was, if I remember right, that was a foul called on the field, but there ended up being no review. The referee didn't have to go to review.
Right.
All of this is part of just institutional madhouse. Forget the fact that you have referees reviewing the calls of referees. The subjectivity of who has to make the decision to question a referee's call is crazy, and there's no way that should not be being decided in a central location a la the NFL and in Major League Baseball, right? That's how those sports work. I think the NFL might do it now too, where it goes to the league office to have referees, first of all, reviewing their colleagues' calls, and then to overturn the call, you have to look at yourself and have the pride and the humility to say, I messed that up. Mm-hmm. That's just not going to happen. The human condition being what the human condition is, if I make a call and I'm passionate about it and I'm convinced in it, I'm not going to overturn it, especially if there's no evidence to, point me in the other direction, which makes the last PK all that much more crazy because he did not make the call on the field and then reviewed the call for 5, 8, 10 minutes and then decided that there was contact. So that's where the conspiracy things come in. That's where the bullshit comes in right there. So let's not get caught up in that this is a world against STL, city or world against small clubs. This is the MLS being incompetent and having absolutely no integrity. That's what this is.
Yep. 3 points that I think that need to happen if MLS, VAR, everything wants to be taken seriously. Your first point of referees cannot start refereeing or being in charge of VAR. It has to be a central office. It has to be just an unbiased, has no connection to the referees at all, because you're exactly right. You're going to be.
And this should be for all leagues, by the way. I would say the same thing for Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, all of it. No, there should not be a fourth official who, more often than not, is in the center the week before that, reviewing those calls. Sorry, go ahead. I just needed to clarify that.
No, I 100% agree with that. 100% agree. I think it has to be just a central office. I would love it almost if it was just, get a different league office in there. You get some people in the Premier League looking at some of these fouls because a lot of them wouldn't be overturned. Secondly, I think that there has to be a shot clock on VAR. If you aren't finding something within a minute, too bad. It's not clear and obvious. You move it on. I think too many times, and I saw this also throughout, and again, this is all leagues as well, because I saw it in a couple Premier League games this year, where even the commentators were saying, well, if you're not finding something at this point, you're just looking for something. And they were even echoing the whole, you can convince yourself something is there if you're looking long enough. And then lastly, I think every week they should release all VAR and referee audio. I don't understand why it isn't being released to the public. Because if you truly believe that was the call or anything, it'll get rid of all conspiracy theories because you'll be hearing the back and forth. It won't be anything like, we got to set this up. 10 minutes. Why is it 10 minutes? Well, we've had this clock and, breakdowns. I think there's enough time for the referees, and just with analytics and everything that they can find nowadays, if they can find how many back passes somebody can do, they can break down as to why there's so much time on VAR. But I think the audio should be released between the VAR, the referee, and I think all referee. You're starting to see it a little bit more where you're hearing the communication that they have just on the field in general, explaining fouls, but also explaining why are they being called over? What are they looking for? I want to hear that dialogue because I think we talked about it last year. There was an Australian league or some other league where they did release that, and it was fascinating to listen to because it was also like you got to see kind of like why am I even looking at this? Yeah, I think he did clip him. I want you to look at this foot here, and then again, but I think it's still got to be within that shot clock window. But one of two things will happen: is you'll either release the audio, realize how just incorrect you are, and then that referee can be disciplined from that moment. Just being like, all right, you guys were both way off on this point. Now the public knows about it. Now we're under more scrutiny. Or maybe they are convincing me on stuff that I don't know about, rules, any sort of thing that even as a fan, there's still stuff that comes up where I'm like, I didn't even know that was a deal. Maybe they can break it down to where it's like, what are they looking at? What are they seeing in that moment? Why were they even called over? Because we're also only getting weird angles at weird times. Like, I just think you want to solve all problems from all that. If you're going to continue on with this VAR model, release the audio. Let us know. Let us into these decisions because from the outside, I mean, this to me was just ones where I was seeing many people from supporting different teams throughout the league because it was making a lot of MLS pages and it was making a lot of that where it was very much if they didn't just hate St. Louis and they just looked at it from a neutral standpoint, they saw that it was like, yeah, there's nothing in that. Like, so now you're also getting this unwanted attention just from around the league. And then the other thing that they have to realize is like, as far as fans go, it can't be as conspiracy because at the end of the day, everybody sees this footage as far as around the world. You don't want your league to become a laughing stock. Now, maybe they don't realize that they're doing that with this just like ridiculous refereeing decisions and all that type of stuff. But I don't think that's necessarily a conspiracy theory. I do see where people saw that and where I was almost leaning towards it was Messi's first year. I was seeing so many calls, top of the center of the box, about 25 yards out, where it's just like, you got to be kidding me. Of course, yeah. And then he would score like a late game winner, and you'd start sitting there going like, well, wait a minute now. Like, that's not a foul. And in that position, you're going to just happen to give it every time. In this situation, I don't think, who knows if Mueller's going to take that. I think Brian White was still on the field at the time, and he took their first PK, so who's to say that, I don't think it would have been set up. They don't, have all that aspect. To me, it was more like, why is there 10 minutes? What is going on here? And then obviously how, and both PKs, I just have that feeling of like how, and like you said, we're not going to get into details. You watch them, that's just our opinions on them. But I think as far as VAR and the systems and the refereeing in general in this league, there has to be changes made.
Yeah, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard, and it starts with accountability. And I think the deficiency in accountability can kind of be summed up. I think I saw Manuel Velth respond back to somebody asking him a question about why the press didn't ask the referee that question after the game, because the referees don't hold press conferences. Obviously, they have a pool reporter. That I think that's how it works. And these questions are submitted. Number one, they're submitted electronically, which I don't agree with. I believe they should have to react in the moment. Number two, all your questions have to be submitted 10 minutes prior to the end of the game. So anything that happens that's questionable in the last 10 minutes of the game, you have no ability to ask those questions. So I am pro accountability in all forms. Fan accountability for abusive behavior, player accountability for on-field conduct, coach accountability for the way they treat referees, right, and the way they behave. Why don't we hold the referees accountable? Why are referees, umpires, anybody in all sports held to a different standard of accountability? Why do they never have to answer for their calls? Because their job has just as big of an impact on the outcome as the actual play on the field. So, they're not getting paid millions of dollars to do the things that they do, but they're choosing to do these jobs, and they're being compensated better than pretty much any other person in those professions. So why should they not be subject to scrutiny? And I'm not saying to dox them and people to threaten them. I'm saying that make a referee available for the last 15 minutes just to answer even softball questions is just, it's insane to me that we're in 2025 and we've decided that we don't need to hold referees accountable. So the internet bandit has struck, and I am officially solo on South End supporters for the first time. This is David's worst nightmare, by the way. He just absolutely hates when I shine. And it's my time to shine while Eric is gone. So I think that's what we were going to wrap up with as far as the game goes. And Eric has just rejoined me and ruined my moment of shining glory by myself. I was just telling everybody how David would absolutely hate me shining by myself because he hates when I succeed at anything. It's just the thing we have between the two of us. I hate the same thing for him. But I was just getting ready to move on to news and notes from the back post presented by our friends at Elite FT 101, The Game Drive. But was there anything that you wanted to add, my friend?
Yeah, just real quick, Jay Clem, you're driving me nuts, man. You're driving me nuts.
He got both of us tonight.
He figured it out. I think they've just got all three of them just go different directions at this point, and they're heading our way. But it's absolutely driving me nuts because I don't know what's been going on with her.
We're having some serious issues, and I think it's a Riverside. I think it's a Riverside thing. Honestly, at this point,
it honestly might be. It's just so confusing how we made it like this far and all of a sudden. But no, the one thing that you were kind of touching on, and you may have went a completely different direction in the 2 minutes I was out. But I couldn't percent agree. If they're starting to introduce, you saw this in the Premier League where they're interviewing players at halftime and coaches and all this type of stuff. Why is there not a press conference directly after the game for these referees? Like, why has that never been a thing? Like, why don't they have them explaining these calls right away? I know the league's trying to protect their referees, but, you're making big decisions in the heat of the moment. You can answer and back up those big decisions in the heat of the moment. But I did not know that, but to have it electronically submitted 10 minutes before the game, there's so many things that happen in that final 10 minutes, and then you're just not even going to address any of that. It's just crazy. And again, it could be a situation where the referees come out and do explain all this stuff, and they can make it make sense. But hiding behind and just leaving it up in the air, I mean, what that does is then it just you have a bad look on that referee from here on out. We still remember the name Joe Dickerson, and it shouldn't be a case. It's just like it needs to be explained to us. And it could. I think post game, those four things. So post game press conference for the referees as well. Obviously, there's no just abusing the referees. You have to treat it just as if you were interviewing a manager or a player with questions that are directed towards and relevant to the game. I think to your point, it can't be referees consulting with referees. I think there has to be a central source that is doing it. I think there has to be a shot clock on VAR, and I think the audio has to be released during the VAR to make it just legitimate. Their claims on all this. But yeah, again,
transparency, man. We just want transparency. Yeah. That's all we want 100%. As fans. We want transparency.
100%. And I hope we start getting into that direction. But unfortunately, again, City drop just a rough one as far as up in Vancouver, 3-2 with that late PK, and they stay.
Let me ask you something. Did you go today, and were you just completely stressed out of your mind? Did you go get a swole session?
I will tell you this, there's a whole new motivation for me. I even went running today, and I just kept thinking in my workout, and as I was running, I just kept thinking internet issues. And for some reason, that is my biggest. That'll get you running marathons, man. If you're just sitting there thinking about the audio issues that you are just dreading on having, you don't think about the pain you're having. But, another place that you can go where you don't think about the pain you're having because you're just having so much fun, and that's, of course, Ready to Live Wellness. No matter what training style you have, they will tailor them towards your goals, and most importantly, making sure you're doing them safe. And as well, another cool thing that they're doing is a lot of these cool outside of the gym events while maybe you're still doing in the gym. I think it's this upcoming Sunday or here shortly, they're having a ruck, coffee, brunch, a whole deal. So not only are you getting the great results within the gym, you're also getting just a great community that you're building within there, and that just makes it that much easier to continue to go when you're making such a great community there. And again, they got so many things to offer, whether it's CrossFit or bodybuilding or whatever your fitness goals may be, they've got you. They've also added Pilates in, And then as well, they're making sure you're doing it in a safe environment and keeping up with your health. They've got body movement specialists, PTs, masseuses, all under one roof. It's a one-stop shop. There's no better place to go than Ready to Live Wellness, so make sure you go check them out at 1530 South Kings Highway Boulevard or online at R2L Wellness. And, of course, if you're looking good or if you're feeling good, looking good, whichever way it is, these refs and these internets have got me all frazzled at this point. Dave, just tell the people about Warrior Logo Wear.
You know, I got to go and hang out and with Chris in person last week, Chris from Warrior Logo Wear. Fantastic guy. Go in and see him at 12 East Main Street, Muscoda, Illinois. They're there to meet all your sportswear needs, whether it's team apparel or T-shirts, hats. They've got such cool stuff. They're doing stuff for all the Muscoda schools, uniforms, and soccer, basketball, baseball. They're doing everything. He told me they've set up something like 144 online stores this year alone, which is just nuts to me. They're rocking and rolling, man. Like they're doing work for McKendree Golf.
Oh, nice.
They're just all over the place, and all their referrals have come like word of mouth because they do such a great job. Chris and his dad, they're both veterans. It's a veteran-owned business. They bring that same dedication that they've had throughout their service time, and they give so much attention to detail. Chris and I had a really good conversation about how for small businesses, reputation and quality is absolutely everything to them, because one bad experience turns into 10 bad referrals, which can turn into 100 bad referrals. It was really cool. I got to see it's not just basic screen printing anymore, man. The game done changed. He showed me they have rooms where they have to control the humidity because it affects the printing and the ink.
That's incredible.
The game done changed in the garment world. So check them out. You will be not disappointed. I came away even more impressed than I already was by the business. 12 East Main Street, Muscoda, Illinois. That's Warrior Logo Wear. WarriorLogoWear.com, or you can find them on all the socials at Warrior Logo Wear, capital W, capital L, capital W, on Twitter, on Instagram at Warrior Logo Wear, all lowercase. The official swag sponsor of the South End Supporters, and really solid guy, man. Like I finally got to meet. We texted back and forth and communicated, but to actually get to meet him, just a good local guy. Does love soccer. Hasn't been to it. Has only gotten to go to one game, and he sat in the supporter section. He actually stood in the supporter section, and we were talking about how he's got, he just had surgery a couple months ago, and it's tough for him. That was a tough experience to stand in the supporter section all the time. I said, we're going to get you into 204 at some point where you stand for the big moments, but we really cater to the more laissez-faire City fan up in the 204. So it was awesome, man. I can't wait. We're talking about potentially doing something around Veterans Day with he and his dad, maybe doing a special broadcast with them and our buddy Chris Mertz. So more to come on that. But yeah, absolutely, man. Warrior Logo Wear, awesome. Best in the business as far as I'm concerned. One thing I did bring up, Eric, and I started to do when I thought I lost you forever, was talk about the elite news and notes from the back post. And this episode is going to be so choppy. We don't know if we're cutting 10 minutes out of the middle. We just don't know. But we're just going to power through because that's what we do. But we do have some elite news and notes outside of your sporting director. It's really hard to follow the worst PK calls ever and your sporting director getting fired within 3 days of each other. But we'll try to push through elite news and notes from the back.
But you know what? That's why these are elite news.
That's right. Elite. Brought to you by Elite FT at 101 The Game Drive, the premier youth sports training program in the Metro East, and they've been doing it since 2002 with the mission of providing a safe, educational, challenging, and fun environment where coaches can instruct and challenge athletes, helping them become confident, disciplined, and elite. They'll start the little ones all the way at the Bosco's Buddies program. Bosco's got a new look. I got a sneak peek at the new Bosco costume. I can't wait to see it on somebody someday and watch the kids running around. Bosco might actually be able to play some soccer now, because before Bosco couldn't even see. But Bosco's Buddies program starts at ages 2 and 3, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. They have classes and camps that teach the future soccer superstar, the basic fundamentals, while focusing on socialization, sportsmanship, and fun. Most importantly, that's the base of everything you should do in the soccer world, in the sports world. It has to be fun. They also offer speed and agility trainings, team trainings, private trainings. Check them out in person at 101 The Game Drive inside the Sports Academy, or Elite FT Soccer on all the socials, or at eliteft.com. They bring you the news and notes of the back post. Eric has got a monopoly on the news and notes in the back post. I'm going to steal one because City 2 won their 13th game in a row. Eric was there. He could tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it was super cool. So as far as my work goes, I work at a group home with people with special needs, and so we got to take 4 of the guys to that game. And what I love about City 2 games is, it's the open admissions. So you can kind of find yourself a spot and keep it open. We were able to find a good section to where the guys could kind of be a little bit more secluded. It was a little bit more towards the end of the field, which was nice because it was towards the north end. And that's actually where the first 2 goals came from for them. So they were right down there, got to see it. But as
That's
well
awesome.
as just all the staff that were there, and just kind of, as we were walking in, they were just, great about letting us know, like, hey, just reminding you guys that we do have a sensory room over here, or these. They were just very accommodating to the gentleman that I brought there. So it was so cool, and it's such a fun atmosphere. It was my first City 2 game, and I was sweating bullets, not because of the weather, because it was a beautiful day, because I did not want that win streak to end, because I knew I had put it out into the ether that I was going to be there, and I was like, I have to make sure that they win. So I was, giving a little extra fist bumps that night, but it's just so cool. It's just such a great family atmosphere. So, again, if you can't make it to the big city games, or it's tougher for you, or you have, you want to test out and see how the kids can handle.
It's a good test run.
Event.
I'm glad you said that. It's a good test run.
It's a great way because you can find yourself a seat. You can see how they handle it. And that night, actually, it was like something they had going on with the partnership with the zoo. So they also had like face painting. I'm not sure if that's there all the time, but they just had a cool different activities that were also there. But it's just so cool, like the amount of time you see with the open admission, all the younger kids just gravitate towards that first row, and the camera guys just hang out there, and they just put those guys up on the big screen. They had like emoji, like Snapchat filter faces that they were putting on them, and the kids just loved it. But most importantly, what I was very impressed with is the amount of kids, and just also as well the gentleman that I brought to the game, just staying involved and interested in the game, and brought them home that night and asked each guy, did you have a good time? And they all said they loved it. So it was a great experience. Again, I recommend if you can't make it to any game, and right now, why not go watch those guys? Because they're on a roll. They're playing great. It was what I took away from just that game. And I've tried to watch, as much as I can. I've said before, it's tough for me to get a full City 2 game in because they are on Sundays typically. But, like, our City 2 is just miles ahead of the rest of the league. Like, it was just pure dominance over SKC2. It was so cool to see, but it's really just a cool time to see, like, players that are on the fringe of maybe making it up. Like Jay Reed got some minutes, Zelensky got some minutes. You saw McSorley, who's featured for us a little bit. Seeing Miggy in the center of the park, just names that
Miggy had 2 goals, didn't he? Didn't Miggy have a brace?
And so it's cool, like, when you see people telling you, like, keep an eye on this, as you were touching on a little bit earlier about that homegrown type stuff. Like, it's cool to see kind of it developing and watching these kids, getting their time. And then it just makes you feel, when those rumors come around, a little bit more, excited about that type of stuff. So, yeah, it was a cool deal. They kept it going. And as well, big news for them, it happened prior to the game, but they clinched a playoff spot already. So good on City 2. They're keeping things rolling. And once it looks like I've lost Dave. But I'm just going to keep it rolling as well. So a couple big news as far as the transfer market goes, and everything like that. First one that came out was Zande Silva has left for Israeli Premier League team Hapoel Tel Aviv FC, pending receipt of his international transfer certificate. Just never really clicked on here. I just thought it was always kind of a weird signing once he wasn't featuring in the team. I think that kind of goes back to the kind of whole Lutz in and out, or being out kind of deal. And we were touching on, like, just signings that just didn't make sense. That was always kind of one that never really clicked on for me. And then seeing him get less and less minutes just kind of felt like a weird one. But being added to the roster full time, and kind of something that I think was on the wall and a lot of people were claiming for, was City SC has moved Makai Joyner from an off-roster homegrown designation to the club's supplemental roster, making him eligible for match day selection for the rest of the season. So we saw him feature a little bit in the game with the Whitecaps. I think it's going to be good, as we were touching on, just to see kind of like you try and find the positives to build on from here, and what's going to work for you going forward. And I think bringing him up and getting him these minutes here towards the end and just getting him that exposure to the league is going to be, important for not only him, but City moving forward. So good on Mackay. Excited to see him get more minutes with the first team. And then one of the later ones that I have here is a cool little event that City's going to be hosting at the City Pavilion. I believe it's Tuesday. I believe it's a Tuesday, but it's August 25th, August 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. There's going to be a meet and greet with Celio, Ido Leuven, and Marcel Hartl. And as well, they're going to be having these specialized scarves made for those guys, kind of like they did. I believe Parker had one, Berkey, and Klaus. You may have saw them in the stores, and it looks like they'll be having these for Leuven and them. But you'll get to meet the guys. What a trio to get to meet as well. So again, that'll be August 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the City Pavilion. So if you can make it out there, go check it out. And then just kind of repeating the last sentiment that Lutz Steel is out as sporting director. That was our lead on the night. And again, Diego Gigliani will be taking over duties as well as John Hackworth for the remainder of the season. So we're going to kind of go ahead and wrap this up before anybody else decides to mess with our internet from here. And hopefully we can get this thing figured out. But, one thing that's always going for us and we really, truly do appreciate is all the sponsors of this show. Starting out with our title sponsors, Ready Live Wellness. Make sure you go check them out at 1530 South Kings Highway Boulevard for all your health and wellness needs. And then as far as that great Warrior logo wear merch, there's only one place to go. It's that Warrior logo wear. Dave highlighted how great of a business and everybody is over there. Check them out at 12 East Main Street in Muscuda, Illinois for all your customizable needs. And then we ended the episode with some Elite news and notes. Again, that's brought to you by Elite FT. Check them out at eliteft.com. Get your kiddos interested in the game or just building their skills. There's no better place to go. Check it out at Elite FT or their address at 101 The Game Drive in Glen Carbon, Illinois. Later on this week, hopefully, we'll have our STL Kolache preview of our upcoming episode, and that's, of course, brought to you by STL Kolache in Sunset Hills. Go check them out for 1530 South Kirkwood Road in St. Louis, so we can keep this Kolache talk going that we always love to do. And as well, we will have, which I expect to be a wild South End submission episode, and that's, again, brought to you by Felix's Pizza Pub. Check them out at 6401 Clayton Avenue in Dogtown. So if this episode does make it to air, you can see all that by following us on our socials. On Instagram, we're South End Supporters. Our Twitter and our Reddit is _SES_podcast STL. And then make sure you're also checking out our Facebook page and our YouTube to keep up with all things South End Supporters. So for myself, Eric Cole, for the Monday Morning Center back, Dave Wyckoff, who's out, and then for our buddy DH, who's actually out, you've been listening to South End Supporters. We'll see you next week. And until then, let's go City.